All right. Hello. My name's Michael Wehar. We're broadcasting here from Swarthmore College's WSRN 91.5 FM. We're really excited to have a special guest here today, Harper. Harper, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Hello, Mike. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Harper Yatvin. I am a huge advocate and fan of design. I studied design in school and I live outside of Philadelphia, where I help make accessible design a reality for more people.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Harper. Again, we're really excited to have you here. We want to learn everything we can about design. So let me jump right into some more questions. How did you first get into design?
So, going through college, I enjoyed quite a bit about what I was learning. And I still never woke up and felt, okay, this is the career that I know I must have. I enjoyed what I'm doing and what I had done in marketing communications, and it was great, and it's still great. But I decided to take an extra course in college, and I entered a intro to design thinking course. And when I went in, it took about 20 minutes into the first session for me to think, wow, I've been here and I absolutely must stay. And then it took about 10 minutes into the second course of the semester for me to really understand this is something that's really important to me and that I want to learn as much of it as I can, as quickly as I can.
Well, that's really awesome to hear that in your courses you were inspired. As a teacher myself, I really hope that I can offer these good inspirations to my students. I don't always succeed, but I try my best. And in those moments where it does happen, it just makes education worth it. So another question I was going to ask you is this passion you have, where does it come from? What leads you to it? What keeps it going for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say it comes from my background and my family. I've worked in the catering industry, the service industry for a while growing up, making money throughout, high school, college during breaks, going around. And I am an able-bodied person. I can stand up. I am able to do work, physically, and just I'm able to do a lot. And life is still really tough and it's still exhausting. So as I have grown up more and grown in my career and just being a person, I've learned how exhausting it must be and how frustrating it must be to be someone who lives with a disability. And so understanding that really helped grow my passion for not just what I want to do, but what I have the opportunity to do for other people.
That that makes sense. I mean, I think that's a really good inspiration that can really keep you going in this field. And I want to ask a bit more. I know you kind of hinted at some of the areas of design, but yeah, what are some of these different areas of designs? What are they called? Specifically, the ones that you're working in and that you want to make an impact in.
What I know about is something called human centered design. If you look at it online, that's a big buzzword term. And I learned about it through my university and through a partnership course with IBM Design Studios. And they actually have a methodology online as well that you can pick up. And really, what it boils down to is human centered design is about designing and solving for person you're trying to solve. It's not about having a problem, looking at it from a business perspective. It's about looking at it from someone is experiencing this. How are they solving it? How are they adapting and adjusting to their problem in everyday life? And whatever method that they're doing, you go ahead, you talk to them. They allow you to see a peek into their life. And getting that perspective is crucial for solving so many different types of problems, especially the ones that aren't obvious.
Well, that's really great, Harper. I can just see the passion and how much you care about this field as you're speaking. Not all the viewers or listeners can see this, but there's just such enthusiasm as you're speaking, and it's something I just can't help but appreciate. So I know that you speak about this topic fairly often. So I'm told you're a podcaster. Could you tell us a little bit about being a podcaster and not only just podcasting, but other venues or places in your life where you're able to speak about these topics you care about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm able to talk about it in a couple different arenas. First of all, on my podcast with my organization, a human centered agency called Article 19, and that talks about how digital accessibility and disability is in everyday life. Just to go over it a little bit, when the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, was created, the internet was not a thing yet. So, with this huge sweeping bill in America, this law had no effect or impact on the internet. So, it's been made on a case by case law basis. So, change only happens once it's a legal requirement on an individual basis and level. So, what my podcast tries to accomplish, what do you do about it? What do you do when the ability for making something accessible, it's very different in a digital realm than a physical realm. In the physical world, curb cuts are a big example. People need them if they have a wheelchair. People benefit from them if they're able-bodied. Pretty much, every single day, you can have a stroller, you can have a walker. If you're someone who's delivering food on into a business or just delivering any packages, you have that rolling dolly. They definitely benefit from them. Those people use that accessible piece of technology in everyday life. But for the internet, it's a lot different. For something like that, you can really benefit from something that has been made in a totally different realm. For example, when computers first came out, they were all inside and nobody really needed to have contrast in any way, which is how clear text or information is according to the background. And the only people who really needed it at the time were people who had low vision, and they really needed were people who were colorblind and had other visual disabilities, and they needed that contrast. Well, that seemed to be a quote tapped market, which is of course not true. But when mobile phones came out and people were going to the beach all the time and they need to know, where can I get a sandwich for my kid around here? Or ice cream. Suddenly the sun's out. There's no shade unless you have an umbrella. And suddenly contrast checkers for phones, they're flying off the market. They're huge and they are instituted in so many different products, especially the ones that we use right now and today. So that's just one example of digital accessibility being used and being beneficial for all. It's very daunting without understanding how to go about the best process. And that's just one example of a good case study for how it can be effective.
I see. Well, I think this is really great how you speak about these subjects in your podcast with your organization. And I want to ask, can you give us any preview of any of the topics that you might speak about in the near future or that you've recently speaked about? I was wondering if you could say any words about those titles. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mike. So there are a few things that we've got coming in. We've got a series of book talks, and these aren't sponsored books. These are just books that we enjoy. There's a book called Mismatch: How Inclusion Shapes Design by Kat Holmes. That's K-A-T. She is talking about how accessibility and inclusion shapes product development, both physically and digitally. And that's just an amazing read. There's a podcast that's very near and dear to my heart that that is very close to in the works, and it is about art and accessibility. And in my mind, it's how do you make that balance? How do you find that balance between being an incredibly gifted artist and you want to create incredible boundary pushing work that's a very aesthetically pleasing while needing to create accessible work that has some pretty clear cut boundaries to what kind of work is accessible on a website, on a mobile phone, on an app. How do you find that balance between what you want to do and what you need to do while still pushing the boundaries? So that's something that I really enjoy. And we've got some other work coming out about alt text, which if you go onto a social media platform and you post a photo, it will often prompt you to put in alternative text. And that is there for people who use a screen reader, which is very often how someone who is blind uses the internet. That's how they interact with a web page. Having that type of information, alt text in a social media post or in a photo, if that information is not there, there's there's no real way that they can understand what that photo is if they are blind or they have another type of visual disability. To give a good understanding of it, imagine going onto a clothing website and you want to buy a shirt or pants, and the alt text for a shirt, which is all the information you get, just says shirt. You don't get size or color or label or any. So that's a real lack of information where it's very frustrating because you're just not letting someone be a part of your process or your product and really your design. You're turning away people when there's no reason for it.
Well, it's really exciting that you're discussing these topics on your podcast. And I think there's a lot of people here in Swarthmore that would be excited to listen and learn more about these subjects. So it's a really great initiative you have, Harper. So I'm going to change gears a little bit. I want to ask you, what do you think is the future of design? What direction are we going in? What might we expect in the next few years or maybe even next 5, 10 years?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. Looking forward now is the best way to make sure we get there sooner. So, something I've been thinking about recently is the question of good design, which is an eternal question that's never going to have one finite answer. But to me, good design personally involves how can we preserve the earth that we have now while making designs that are still incredible today.
Well, thank you very much for telling us more about finding ways that we can approach these difficult situations together. So, my last question here, do you have any advice for students who might be interested in design, want to even get into accessible design, how they might take steps towards creating a career or starting their career in this area?
So, I know something that worked for me was going out to your alumni network, knowing people who just looking up in your organization, looking up in LinkedIn or looking up in your alumni network who has worked in design, who's working on it in the city that you want to live in or where you're living now, looking up your local design organizations. Something that I know about is the Community Design Collaborative in Philadelphia. There's a small fee you put on their roster, but when you do, you get emails that say, here's a project that we're working on. If you're the right type of person for this, please go ahead and apply. And that's just free experience coming at you fast. So to me, that's really helpful. Attending something like Creative Mornings, which is a free talk service, something like that, I think is really, really helpful. And everyone says it, and it's always frustrating, but everyone gets there differently. And figuring out the next step for you is just a matter of saying, I want to do this. And sometimes it's just a matter of emailing people again and again. Like on the podcast space, you can ask for 50 or 100 guests. If you get 3 to 5, it's a good.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate having you here, Harper. You've shed a lot of light on the field of design, accessible design, what we might expect in the coming years. And I hope some of our listeners end up tuning into your podcast as well. So that's all I have. Well, thank you so much, Harper. Again, my name's Michael Wehar, broadcasting here from Swarthmore College's WSRN 91.5 FM, and we're signing off for today. Thank you all those out there who are listening. Thanks.